started Drive Home Reviews, I had a fairly simple concept in mind, and that was to discuss the movies I had just seen, like literally right out the theater door as I was driving home, hence the name. I liked the feeling of a gut reaction. This was what I felt in the moment, and my impressions of the movie just right off the bat. And I think that gave it a little bit of freshness. It's not to say that there aren't some drawbacks. One of the downsides to that approach is that some films lend themselves to a little bit more thought before completely discussing them. This can also be a drawback because some movies, as it's turned out, have been so forgettable. If you wait a day or two, you end up forgetting most of what you just saw. So, there are drawbacks. But over the last couple years, the practice kind of became to wait a day or two, let things simmer, let thoughts form, and opinions kind of come after a little bit of contemplation. And this is one of those movies where I'm glad I took that time, because if I had reviewed it right out the gate, I don't know if I would have given it as good a review as I was going to, because there were a lot of things in it that struck me as a little callous, and things that were very hard to kind of wrap my head around in the moment. But I took some time, and especially with a picture like this one, which is dealing with a really important historical event that my parents were, they were witnesses to, I was able to I called them and talked to them about the actual event, about what happened, and was able to educate myself a little bit more on the events of the film. And thus, I feel like I had a better understanding of some of the aspects of the movie that I wasn't necessarily gifted with going in. So the film in question is September 5th. And I've got to say right off the bat, in terms of reviewing and trying to figure out, what reviews go in which year, this is one of those ones that's always confusing, because all of the release dates, like on IMDb and YouTube, say 2024, but there was no way to see the movie until this month. Maybe it did a limited release to maybe get it into for some Oscar contention, which I don't think worked for it. But I tend to go, this is when I was actually able to see the movie, so this is when I'm going to review the movie. I also go with the thought process, it's my show, so I get to make these decisions. So, for those who don't know, and I think you can be forgiven if you don't, because this was almost 50 years ago. Well, not almost, this was over 50 years ago, 1972. This is a film dealing with the terrorist attack on the Olympic Village at the 72 Games in Munich, where a band of Palestinians climbed the gate with semi-automatic weapons. They took the Israeli team hostage, held them hostage for most of the day, ended up driving to an airport where there was a shootout with the German police, in which all of the terrorists and unfortunately all of the hostages were killed. So this was an incredibly tense and scary time. This is the first time as the movie lets us know. This is the first time when a terrorist attack like this one, or any kind of major issue, was broadcast live, like all over the world, which is something I had to kind of reconcile with. One thing I'm always a big proponent of with movies, especially when you're talking about older films, is you have to understand that while certain things like in Citizen Kane or Psycho or things like that might seem tame by today's standards, we have to understand that these were some of the first times stuff like this had been done. And, you know, it's very easy, again, 50 some years on, for events that a lot of us were not around to witness, to understand, especially, you know, sadly, very sadly, you know, we are of a generation and of a time that has seen the Oklahoma City bombing, plane crashes, 9/11, January 6th, you know, we have seen a lot of shit broadcast live. And that's just the stuff off the top of my head. There's more. You know, we've seen, you know, school shootings, terrorist attacks in London. Yeah, like, it's, for us, we're so inundated with it that the idea of thinking about what this must have been like for people the very first time they saw this, that is, I can't imagine. I really can't. You know, and again, talking to my parents about it was very enlightening. So anyway, I got a little off track. But this movie is fascinating in that its focus is on the newsroom. So this is the newsroom that was there in Munich to broadcast sports. This was the sports team. The reporters that were there were the sports reporters. And this is them. The whole thing takes place in the newsroom. People leave it, and we see them kind of on the TV screens and whatnot, but we never actually go with them for any of these events. So all the information we're getting is the same information the news people are getting, and they're dealing with it in the moment, and having to make these split-second decisions in the moment. And that's a fascinating point of view to take this on. Because a lot of times in movies like this, we have that third-person omniscient narrator where we are privy to a lot of information. And we, again, with a historical film, a lot of times we know the outcome. But narrowing the focus like that, I think, really helps sell, again, for an audience that primarily is not going to know what this felt like. It's a great way of recreating that tension. And you do feel it. I knew how this came out for the most part. I knew everybody, unfortunately, lost their lives. But I didn't know, that they actually left the Olympic Village. I didn't know that they had their leader out there in a white frickin' suit and mask talking to people, negotiating. I didn't know any of that. That was bizarre. So putting it in this narrow focus really helped. Not only did it kind of shine a light on these incidents and how people were reacting to them in the moment, but it also shone a light on the real life work of newscasters. So this film sets out to, at least in my mind, try to be as fact of life as it can. This feels like it's trying to be a documentary almost. So you're in that kind of Tora level of filmmaking. There are no stars. The names of the actors I had to look up. And most of them were in things I had not seen, or if they were in something I had seen, it was who was that? Which I think is wise. I think for a film like this and the thing they were trying to do with it, I think if you had a I'm just going to pull names out of my ass here. If you had a Tom Hanks, a Tom Cruise, a Jessica Chastain, a Matt Damon, really recognizable actors, I think the slice of life, people trying to do the very best they can under extreme circumstances, every person feel of it would have been lost. We would focus so much on the star, excuse me, that we would lose the impact of, you are there, this could be you kind of thing. And I have to say, I think all the actors did a great job in that it's an ensemble piece. There's not really one standout performance from anybody. There's not like a star-making turn in any of this. But again, I think that's the point. This has to be an ensemble. This has to be a group effort, and the star of the film, for lack of better terminology, is the story. The closest thing I could come to a comparison is maybe Argo. And this film definitely feels like it kind of wants to be a little bit less spit and polished version of Argo. So I think the actors are very good. They're very competent. They complement each other well, and they do create that real world feel. So let's talk about that real world feel, because there again, and I want to go back to something I had said a few minutes ago, the idea of this was the first time that this had happened. And one of the things I came out of this movie with a couple of new insights. First of all, obviously the insight into the actual event and what happened, at least in terms of the nuts and bolts of it. So I appreciated that. You always hear this thing of educate yourself and get more knowledge. Well, I have more knowledge now, so I am very appreciative of that. The other thing that's kind of made you think about, at least me, is I'm sorry to use this term, so please forgive me, but I can't think of a better, more eloquent way to put it. What balls newscasters and news reporters, genuine, real journalists. I'm not talking Fox News and, fake news kind of bullshit. I'm talking about real, on-the-ground journalists. And the people in their control rooms, and the people, feeding them their information and doing all this. What they have to do in a situation like this. And that was something I never honestly thought about. And again, this is me growing up in an era where everything is broadcast. I listed all the atrocities that I had seen in my life broadcast. And to think about what those people have to go through, they've got to be on the ball. It's kind of like almost like being a doctor, I would think. You've got to put your personal fears and trepidations and concern, you have to kind of shove that to the side and focus on the job, because you are providing the information for everybody else who is as scared as you are, and they're looking to you, whether they know it or not, for the information. And I had never honestly thought about that. Anytime I had seen a newsroom portrayed in TV or movies, it was always a very heightened reality. It was always either they're batting at low-hanging fruit like tabloid journalism, or it's really glossy. Like I watched a bit of that. I think it was an HBO show, that Newsroom with Jeff Daniels. So it's a very spit and polished kind of operation on those. Much in the same way, the labs that you see on CSI are not the neon light lit, rooms that actual crime scene investigators frequent, And I have to admit that there were certain times during the film where I was kind of like, holy shit, are you human? You know, are you fucking kidding me about this? Do you not realize that these are people that are in this kind of trouble, and there are people that are, you know, that whose lives are hanging by a thread, and the way the main guy, and I'm sorry I forget his name, both the actor and the actual person, but the guy running the newsroom and making the calls, you know, he got on his high horse a couple times, and we got to get in there, we got to get this camera on. Like, is that really the most important thing right now? And yes, at that moment, yes, that was the most important thing. That is what they needed. They needed information. People needed information about what was going on. And these men and women, and they do it now too, had to put their emotions on the side to get the job done. And so it can come off the movie, and this is one of the reasons why I'm glad I took time with this film as opposed to giving a gut reaction. Because my gut reaction was, oh my God, how insensitive are you? But upon reflection, it's like, no, that's not insensitivity, that's practicality. Just like a doctor. You know, it might not seem like it, but it is. Going back to what I was talking about a little bit ago about, you know, this was the first time this had happened. There's another moment where I almost got so mad at the movie, I almost stopped watching or had to take a break from it. So there is an instance where the police they're doing something. They're like scaling the roofs. They're like looking in. So it looks like they're about to go for an attack to try to save the hostages. And suddenly the newsroom has this epiphany of like, wait a minute, do they have TVs in that, in those hotel rooms? Because we're broadcasting live. And the ABC sports group were the only group that were broadcasting live. Everybody else was kind of getting their information second and third hand. But they were right there. They had all the equipment, so they were going live, and they suddenly realized these fuckers are watching us from inside their hotel room. And they're seeing what we're seeing, meaning they're seeing these cops, you know. And I got mad at that because, of course, being a person who came up at the age I did, who now lives in a world of constant news coverage, you know, someone farts and 3 seconds later it's on TikTok, you know, 1 million times. Of course I was like, well, yeah, dumbasses. Yes, of course they're watching it. You know, that didn't occur to you? How did that not occur to you? And it didn't occur to them because it didn't occur to them. The hotels every hotel room didn't have a TV, and even the ones that didn't get every station, especially a station from a foreign country that was broadcasting there. So yeah, they didn't think of it. Because why would they? It was new. It was not something that was so commonplace. And this is, again, why I felt it was a good thing to kind of take this movie at a distance and think about it and go, oh yeah, that does make sense why that happened, or why, you know, they wouldn't have thought of that. And I like that in a movie. I like a movie that makes me think about things. I like a movie that makes me, this is a tired cliche and I'm not using it correctly, but again, it's the first thing I can think of, that makes you kind of check your privilege a little bit. And makes you kind of go, hey, don't be so judgmental with these people who are, you know, doing the best they could. Like, maybe put yourself in that role, which is what the movie really tries to do. One of the other things I liked about this movie right off the bat was that I'm a sucker. One of the things I love in movies, I love movies, especially period films, that show kind of the inner workings of the newsroom. The calls and the faxes coming in, and the running to get this. And this one went even further and showed you like how they did like the title plates, and when they had to get the photos for reference, they had pictures of the Israeli team, but they were only small, so they had to send them down to the photographer, who had to take pictures of the pictures and then blow them up. And that's, again, not things we think about in the modern era, where you can get all this stuff, with a couple clicks of a keyboard. Not to say that anybody who does this on the fly, that it's easy or it doesn't take skill. Just saying that back then it was even more so. So I loved that. I loved how detailed and period accurate the film was. I thought it was, that really was engrossing to me. I found that incredibly intriguing. There are some things about this movie that, even upon reflection, still make me kind of go, really? There's some odd choices. The opening, I understand what they were trying to do. So the opening is done in this very old school 70s ABC logo kind of thing, and trying to make it look like a recreation of the ABC news broadcast, to give you the exposition, where we are, what's going on, how, setting up that, ABC is there doing unprecedented live coverage. Again, first time that had been done in the Olympics, I believe. So it's giving you all of this very, it's a clever way to do exposition, but the voiceover they're using, I do not believe that was an actual voiceover. It sounds like Trey Parker doing a fake newscast on South Park. It sounds like, so what do we do now, folks? That's right, we duck and cover. And I get the idea of juxtaposition of tone and starting things out optimistic, and then and in a way kind of goofy, and then segueing slowly into this very serious life and death situation, this tragedy. I get that, but still, that opening felt like it went a little too far in the opposite direction. It's a tight rope to walk, and I understand that it's easy to step over one side or the other, and I do feel they stepped over the side on it personally. It was a little too lighthearted and a little too comical, at least to me. So yeah. The other thing, so as I said, one of the main thrusts of this film is that these very dedicated and very brave men and women who worked in this newsroom and in all legitimate, journalistic newsrooms, that they are called upon in moments of stress and tension and fear and the unknown to push their own feelings aside so that they can provide the information needed for the greater good. But that doesn't mean they don't feel things. I think they could have stressed that last bit a little bit longer. At the end of the film, when everything is finished, and our main character, and again, sorry, it's Peter Skarsgård, I believe, playing the character. I think, I could be wrong. But he's leaving, and they have the billboard of the Israeli team up behind them. And he just kind of takes a moment and looks at it and then turns and walks away. And the camera lingers on it for a little longer. I get what they were trying to do. I really do. I get what they were trying to do. But to me, it didn't land. it was a moment where I think we needed to see these characters, all of them. If it had been me, if I'd been making this film, I would have done like a slow pan kind of montage of everybody we had followed. We followed the German translator, we followed several cameramen, and, you know, we had like Peter Jennings, you know, who was one of the main newscasters. I would have followed each of them in a moment of solitude and seen them really let all of the emotion they had just gone through hit them. And let them feel and weep and drink or whatever it was they needed to do, just to show how brave they had to be to push all this aside, but it doesn't mean that they didn't feel it. And I understand that the film was trying to do that with that last lingering shot, but it felt more like an afterthought. And I think that was a disservice. That was a disservice to the excellent filmmaking and the complex situation that it was trying to recreate. It didn't stick its own landing, in my opinion. Or maybe we didn't even need to go with the entirety of the crew that we had spent time with. Maybe just that main guy. Maybe we could just hung on him for a little bit longer, seen more anguish in his face, see it creeping up on him, even if he then kind of forces it back because he's got to go back to work the next day. Then I think that would have sold it for me. But it was a little too quick, a little too nonchalant, and a little too, it was a little too dismissive. And I know that's not what the movie was going for, but I think it needed to linger a little longer. That's my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe other people saw it and did not, it really hit them in the gut. So yeah, those are kind of my big issues with the film. But on the whole, this was a movie I'm glad I watched. It's a movie I'm glad I watched. I've spoken more about the way it made me feel and the way it made me think than the actual nuts and bolts of the filmmaking. But I think that shows that it was a success. If it got me to think and it got me to feel, then it did what a good movie should do. I should be thinking about these situations long after I've seen the film. I should talk about them and the ideas after I've seen the film. If you're not doing that with a movie, then, especially a movie like this, then that movie has failed. So this is an incredibly well-made, well-acted, smartly directed, tight, historical piece. And I would wager it's probably more historically accurate than a lot of other films you'd see. Good performances, good filmmaking, smart choices, and again, one that, at least for me, made me reevaluate some of my thoughts. And that's what a good piece of art should do. So I highly recommend this movie. I especially recommend it for, as I said way back at the beginning, for an incident that is becoming more and more a memory. More and more people who were there, who experienced it, are gone. And we are now in a civilization and a society where, sadly, these kind of things and the broadcasting of them are way too commonplace. So going back and kind of learning about this moment, I think is important. I think it's very important that we do that. And we recognize not just the people who were in that newsroom, but the people who lost their lives. And we remember, just how fucked up this can get, So I think this is a film worth watching. So final grade for September 5th, I'm giving it a B+. I'm giving it a B+ from me. Good movie, good time, not good time, that's terrible. Good movie, well made, and get you thinking. So I think that's a good thing. All right. So there we have it. Fascinating film this time out. Very fascinating. Will we have that fascinating of a film the next time we meet? Well, there's only one way to find out. Come on back and we will see what we have next time. So until then, thank you for joining me. And as always, drive safe and I will see you at the movies.